The lights in the studio dimmed to a low hum, the audience buzzing with anticipation. A cinematic glow casting shadows across Jimmy Kimmel's familiar grin. The camera panned slowly across the set, capturing the stage like a battlefield before the storm. You could almost hear the tension crackle in the air. Tonight was supposed to be another routine episode, another safe night of scripted jokes and rehearsed laughter. But no one knew that the facade was about to shatter in seconds. It began with the entrance of two figures who didn't belong in late-night comedy. Not in the world of fake laughter, staged applause, or carefully curated hot takes. Carlson, the kind of HOA, a neighbor who never lets a leaf fall in the wrong place without comment, and Gutfeld, with his razor-sharp wit and a smile that promised merciless truths. They strode onto the stage with a calm, unnerving confidence, like predators walking into prey territory. Jimmy's usual smirk faltered for a fraction of a second long enough for the cameras to capture it. The audience sensed it immediately. The energy shifted. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. You could almost hear the silent question hanging in the air. What just happened? Jimmy attempted to launch into a joke, a quick jab at politics he thought would deflect attention. Well, looks like the HOA finally sent in their dream team. His voice carried an uneasy laughter that didn't land. Karen's stare cut across the stage, ice in her eyes. Greg didn't smile. He simply said, "Dream team?" "No, Jimmy. We're here to clean up the comedy mess you've been calling truth." The room went still. Every camera angle seemed to tighten, zooming in on Jimmy's flailing charm, the glimmer of panic just beneath his surface. The tension was cinematic, like watching a superhero realize the villain had anticipated every move. The audience shifted in their seats, sensing a confrontation that wasn't scripted. Karen leaned forward, her tone deadly calm. "Jimmy, you've spent years pretending to understand the world, but your comedy? It's fake, it's shallow, and it's built on narratives that don't hold up outside your little bubble." The words hit like cinematic slow-motion punches. Every syllable was measured, designed to dismantle decades of late-night performative confidence. Greg added his signature biting twist, his voice dripping both sarcasm and authority. "You've laughed at others, made mockeries of real struggles, and yet you call that comedy. Tonight we're holding a mirror up, Jimmy, and that mirror doesn't lie." The audience gasped. Social media was already alive in the background clip circulating, hashtags trending. Tweets imagined in real time, #Kimmel exposed, #HOA victory. Jimmy Kimmel's comedy is canceled live. People replayed Karen's words, dissected Greg's sarcasm. Memes exploded. The humiliation was instant, viral, and merciless. Behind the scenes, the expose began to unfold. Karen had spent months gathering every misstep, every failed joke, every contradiction in Jimmy's public persona. She revealed the hypocrisy layer by layer, his criticisms of the wealthy while living in luxury, his edgy jokes that relied on punching down, his carefully curated persona of empathy that crumbled under scrutiny. Each revelation landed like a hammer, echoing through the studio like a gavel in a courtroom. Then the turning point, the moment that sealed Jimmy's downfall. He tried to deflect, tried to pivot into his own scripted charm. But Karen anticipated it. Greg timed the intervention perfectly. "No more deflections," Karen said. "Tonight, the truth isn't optional." The lights seemed to sharpen, the sound of the audience's collective intake of breath almost audible. Jimmy's confidence cracked out in the climax. It all unraveled. Jimmy's attempts to reclaim the stage fell flat. His laughter sounded hollow. Every camera cut captured the subtle shift, the once commanding late-night host reduced to defensive murmurs. Karen and Greg controlled the narrative completely, their composure a stark contrast to Jimmy's unraveling act. By the end, the humiliation wasn't just public, it was poetic. The faux comedy persona was stripped bare, leaving only a man who had miscalculated the consequences of underestimating his opponents. In the aftermath, the studio felt different. The audience left buzzing, clips circulating endlessly online. HOA forums praised Karen's precision. Twitter celebrated Greg's timing. And Jimmy? The fall was dramatic, permanent in the eyes of the digital world. The incident sparked debates about authenticity, satire, and the fine line between comedy and performative righteousness. Months later, reflections surfaced. People didn't just remember the jokes or the confrontation. They remembered the truth laid bare on live television. HOA, Karen Tucker Carlson and Greg Gutfeld, didn't just humiliate a late-night host. They exposed a system, a performance, a narrative that had gone unchallenged for too long. And in that cinematic moment of live confrontation, the world saw a dramatic, unforgettable lesson. Fake comedy, no matter how polished, can't withstand relentless truth. The studio lights flickered as Jimmy slumped slightly, trying to regain composure. Every eye in the audience was fixed on him, some with disbelief, others with barely contained glee. Karen and Greg didn't flinch. They stood as statues of unshakable calm, their presence dominating the space like titans in a coliseum. Jimmy's usual quick wit, his armor of practiced humor, was gone, leaving only a man exposed to the brutal clarity of truth. The tension didn't just hang in the studio, it spilled into the digital world. Social media erupted in real time, turning the confrontation into an instant spectacle. Clips of Karen's icy glare and Greg's scathing remarks went viral within minutes. Jimmy Kimmel can't even fake it anymore, read one trending tweet. HOA Karen just ended late-night comedy as we know it, wrote another. Memes exploded, pitting Jimmy's faltering smirk against Karen's unwavering stare, turning his humiliation into entertainment for millions. Back on stage, the audience shifted nervously, unsure whether to laugh or gasp. Some tried to cheer him on, but even their applause felt hollow against the tide of exposure crashing down. Karen leaned closer, her voice cutting through the tension like a scalpel. "You've built a career on the illusion of honesty, Jimmy. Tonight, that illusion ends. Every joke, every laugh you've harvested, it's all hollow without accountability." Greg stepped in, pacing slowly across the stage, his words measured but lethal. "Comedy isn't about clever lines. It's about truth. And the truth? You've avoided it. You've mocked real struggles for applause. You've disguised hypocrisy as satire. That ends now." The room went still. Even the production crew stopped mid-task, mesmerized by the raw intensity of the confrontation. Then came the deeper expose, the layer beneath the public humiliation. Karen produced a folder, pulling out carefully documented examples of Jimmy's contradictions and missteps over the years. Photos, video clips, transcripts, it was a slow surgical dissection of his public persona. "You lecture the world about morality," Karen said, flipping through a page with surgical precision, "but you've ignored every rule you expect others to follow. Tonight, the mirror isn't optional, Jimmy. Look at yourself." Jimmy fumbled, trying to interject, fumbling through his defense. But the crowd sensed the unraveling. His jokes, once sharp, now sounded defensive, desperate. He stumbled over words that would normally roll off his tongue with ease. Every attempt to pivot back into comedy fell flat, the studio echoing with the uncomfortable silence of a performance gone terribly wrong. The turning point came when Karen dropped the final piece of evidence, a meticulously compiled record of his public statements, contradicting the causes he claimed to support. "You've sold sincerity as a brand," she said, voice low but lethal. "And now the brand is bankrupt." Greg nodded, his gaze never leaving Jimmy. "This isn't just entertainment, Jimmy. This is accountability. And in this room, you're out of excuses." For the first time, Jimmy looked truly lost. The stage lights captured the faint tremor in his smile, the subtle shift in posture from confident host to exposed human. Karen and Greg had flipped the script entirely. What was supposed to be a controlled, late-night segment had become a live unmasking. The audience murmured, some rising to their feet, Caught between shock and awe, the climax hit like a cinematic explosion. Jimmy's attempts to regain control were met with calm, relentless opposition. Karen and Greg's synergy left no opening for deflection. His laughter, once practiced and polished, rang hollow and desperate. By the end, he was silent, the studio holding its breath as the full weight of the humiliation sank in. The cameras captured it all, the faltering host, the unwavering challengers, and the stunned audience. And the aftermath was immediate. Clips flooded the internet, trending worldwide. HOA forums debated Karen's precision and Greg's timing. Late-night commentary shows dissected every word, every expression. The incident sparked conversations about authenticity in entertainment, the moral responsibility of public figures, and the fragility of carefully curated personas. Weeks later, the ripple effect continued. Jimmy's ratings dipped, while Karen and Greg became unlikely heroes in the court of public opinion. The narrative had shifted completely. It wasn't just about one humiliating segment, it was about exposing the theater of pretense, the cost of building a career on false narratives. And in the minds of the public, the message was clear. Comedy without truth is nothing more than smoke and mirrors. And even the brightest stars can be burned when the illusion collapses. Days after the episode aired, the world seemed to move differently for Jimmy Kimmel. Every news feed, every trending topic, every conversation, even casual water cooler chatter was tainted by that one night. Clips of Karen Tucker Carlson's icy glare and Greg Gutfeld's razor-sharp takedown were everywhere. It wasn't just social media. It was a cultural event. People dissected his every word, replayed the uncomfortable pauses, and debated whether comedy could survive such brutal honesty. Meanwhile, inside the studio, the production team still couldn't believe what had happened. Camera operators replayed shots again and again, the moment Jimmy's practiced grin faltered. The instant Karen leaned in with surgical precision, Greg's calm dominance over the stage. Even the seasoned crew, accustomed to late-night theatrics, admitted it was unlike anything they had ever witnessed. Jimmy tried to pivot, to explain, to reclaim some semblance of control. But each public statement only amplified the fallout. His attempts at humor now sounded forced, defensive, almost desperate. Late-night audiences who once hung on his every joke now watched with critical eyes, dissecting every syllable, waiting for him to trip again. Every appearance felt like a trial rather than entertainment. Karen and Greg, meanwhile, didn't retreat. They doubled down, appearing on talk shows, giving interviews, posting clips online that dissected the confrontation with precision. Each explanation, each comment, further cemented the narrative. Jimmy Kimmel's comedy persona had been exposed as a carefully curated illusion, a brand built on pretense rather than truth. HOA forums erupted with discussions, debates over the fairness of Karen's intervention, the ethics of public shaming, and the role of accountability in entertainment. Finally, someone called out Kimmel, read one post. "It's about time someone exposed the truth behind that fake laughter," read another. Memes evolved, layering humor over the initial humiliation, each iteration sharpening the blow. Jimmy was no longer just a host. He had become a symbol of what happens when facades are challenged by relentless honesty. Then came the deeper expose what few people knew. Karen had not simply walked into the studio unprepared. She had spent months investigating Jimmy's public statements, compiling contradictions, exposing hypocrisy, and identifying patterns of performative empathy that didn't align with his actions. Every joke, every skit, every public comment was cross-referenced against documented behavior, building a case so airtight it left no room for excuses. Greg added commentary on live streams, dissecting the methodology with surgical precision. "This isn't about politics," he explained, "or even comedy. It's about accountability. Jimmy Kimmel has been rewarded for pretense for decades, and tonight, that reward ends." His calm, analytical delivery only intensified the impact. making the public feel the weight of the revelation, almost as if they had all been in the studio witnessing the confrontation themselves. The public backlash was relentless. Clips circulated endlessly, hashtags trended worldwide, and discussions erupted on every platform imaginable. People who had never watched Jimmy's show before found themselves drawn in, watching the confrontation, dissecting it, debating its implications. The humiliation became a phenomenon, a cultural touchstone for accountability in entertainment, for exposing the gap between public persona and reality. Then came the turning point, the moment when Jimmy could no longer hide. On a live streaming platform, Karen and Greg released a detailed timeline of his public statements, skits, and appearances, juxtaposed against evidence of contradictions and hypocrisy. The presentation was meticulous, cinematic, and unrelenting. The public watched, mesmerized, as the truth unfolded like a carefully scripted drama. Jimmy's carefully constructed narrative crumbled in real time, replaced by a stark, uncomfortable reality. His comedy persona had been built on a foundation of illusion. In the climax, Jimmy attempted one last stand on a televised interview, hoping to reclaim some dignity. But Karen and Greg anticipated every move. Each question, each comment, each defensive laugh was countered with precision. By the end, he was exposed completely, not just humiliated, but publicly dethroned. The cameras captured it all: the faltering host, the unyielding challengers, and the stunned audience, both in the studio and around the world. And the aftermath was permanent. Ratings for Jimmy's show plummeted. His social media presence became a sight for ridicule rather than admiration. Karen and Greg became unlikely cultural icons, celebrated for dismantling a facade with precision, courage, and a sense of righteous indignation. The narrative had shifted permanently. Comedy without truth, no matter how polished, was vulnerable to exposure, and even the brightest stars could fall when confronted with relentless honesty. Months later, reflections emerged. Late-night hosts quietly adjusted their approaches, aware that the boundaries of accountability had shifted. Social media commentators cited the confrontation as a case study in public exposure, morality, and the dangers of performative humor. For Jimmy Kimmel, the night remained a defining, humbling moment, a cinematic downfall witnessed by millions, a lesson etched into the annals of entertainment history. The night of the final televised confrontation felt different. It wasn't just a show anymore, it was a reckoning. Jimmy Kimmel walked onto the stage, his usual swagger replaced by a tentative step, a faint tremor in his confidence. The audience sensed it immediately. Every camera angle, every spotlight seemed to focus on him, magnifying his uncertainty. Across the stage, Karen Tucker Carlson and Greg Gutfeld waited like judges in a courtroom, their calm precision a stark contrast to the tension radiating from Jimmy. The first words from Karen were deliberate, sharp. "Jimmy, tonight isn't about jokes. Tonight is about honesty. And your brand of comedy? It's been built on avoidance, illusion, and pretense." Greg stepped forward, his voice low, almost theatrical. "We've shown the world what your act really is. Tonight, it's time for you to face the consequences." Jimmy opened his mouth to respond, but the words faltered. Every attempt at humor, every defensive quip, rang hollow. Karen and Greg's timing was flawless. They didn't just expose him, they controlled the narrative entirely. The studio audience leaned forward, captivated by the tension, the drama, the slow unraveling of someone who had always been untouchable on screen. Then came the visual evidence. Karen and Greg unveiled a cinematic montage, clips of Jimmy's jokes juxtaposed against his contradictory statements, images of luxurious homes and parties, videos of performative charity juxtaposed against private indifference. The montage played like a movie, each frame amplifying the humiliation. Gasps echoed through the studio. Some audience members covered their faces. Others watched, transfixed. Jimmy's eyes darted nervously from screen to screen, realizing that this wasn't escapable. this was permanent. Social media exploded in real time. Tweets, hashtags, and memes went viral within seconds. Hashtag Kimmel exposed. Hashtag HOA domination. Hashtag comedy unmasked. They trended worldwide. Every clip, every sarcastic remark, every scathing look from Karen or Greg became a digital dagger. Even comedians, late-night hosts, and critics weighed in, dissecting Jimmy's mistakes, contradictions, and failures with surgical precision. The humiliation was now global, unstoppable. Then came the turning point, the moment when the audience realized this wasn't just a critique. It was a revolution. Jimmy tried to deflect, tried to charm, but Karen interrupted. No more deflections. No more charm. The world isn't laughing anymore, Jimmy. They're watching. And they're judging. Greg's voice cut through the tension like steel. Comedy without truth is just noise. And you've been selling noise for decades. Jimmy's defenses crumbled completely. His laughter faltered. His once confident body language shrank. Karen and Greg didn't just humiliate him, they stripped away the illusion, leaving him exposed in a way that would be remembered for years. Cameras captured every twitch, every pause, every moment of disbelief. It was cinematic, unforgettable, the kind of drama that felt scripted, but was painfully real. By the end, the climax was absolute. Karen and Greg had turned a stage designed for entertainment into a courtroom of truth. Jimmy Kimmel, once untouchable in his world of late-night comedy, had been publicly dethroned. The audience erupted in a mixture of shock, awe, and exhilaration. The cameras panned across stunned faces, capturing the gravity of the moment. The resolution didn't stop there. Weeks later, the ripple effects reshaped the entertainment landscape. Jimmy's ratings plummeted. Appearances became rare and awkward. Social media continued to circulate clips, keeping the humiliation alive. Karen and Greg, meanwhile, were hailed as champions of accountability. Their strategic precision celebrated across forums, TV panels, and online communities. They hadn't just won a confrontation. They had shifted the cultural conversation about honesty, comedy, and public responsibility. Long-term, the aftermath was profound. Late-night hosts reconsidered their approaches, wary of crossing the line between humor and hypocrisy. Viewers demanded authenticity, and the public became hyper-aware of performative personas. Jimmy Kimmel's fall became a case study in how illusion can crumble under the weight of relentless truth. Karen and Greg's intervention became legendary, immortalized as a cinematic moment of justice in the world of entertainment. And in quiet reflection, beyond the flashing cameras and viral clips, a truth lingered. Comedy is fragile when divorced from integrity. Comedy is fragile when divorced from integrity. The night Karen Tucker Carlson and Greg Gutfeld confronted Jimmy Kimmel live was more than a humiliation. It was a lesson, a dramatic reminder that truth, when delivered with precision and courage, can topple even the most polished illusions. The world watched, remembered, and learned. And Jimmy Kimmel? He would never step on that stage the same way again. Even before the cameras started rolling that fateful night, a quiet storm was brewing backstage. Jimmy Kimmel paced nervously, adjusting his tie for the third time, a ritual that usually calmed him but now felt hollow. Producers whispered in corners, unsure whether to intervene or let the tension play out. The crew had never seen Jimmy like this, tense, jittery, aware that something unpredictable was about to happen. Karen and Greg were already in place, calm, composed, almost regal in their demeanor, as if they had stepped out of a movie frame into real life. The moment Karen stepped onto the set, the room felt smaller, tighter. Every eye followed her movements, the deliberate click of her heels, the crisp angle of her shoulders, the way she surveyed the studio like a strategist assessing a battlefield. Greg followed with his signature slow, measured stride, a smirk that promised controlled chaos. Jimmy tried his usual charm offensive, tossing a casual wave to the audience, but the energy had shifted. It wasn't playful anymore. It was electric. Karen's first words were a whisper that cut through the ambient murmur. "Jimmy, this isn't a joke." The audience leaned forward, sensing the subtle weight behind those words. Greg added, calm but lethal, "We've spent months observing, cataloging, preparing. Tonight we don't just confront you, we expose you." The audience gasped. Some shifted in their seats. A few pulled out phones mid-show, instinctively capturing the moment. Online platforms lit up almost instantly. Hashtags started trending. Twitter exploded with early clips. Memes were already forming. The humiliation wasn't just coming, it was already airborne. Jimmy tried to quip. "Well, I guess even late night can get a neighborhood watch, huh?" But it fell flat. Karen's glare froze him mid-laugh, the audience reacting with an awkward mixture of chuckles and gasps. Greg stepped closer, his tone slicing through the tension. "Your comedy isn't clever, Jimmy. It's convenient. And convenience doesn't stand under scrutiny." The next moments played out like a slow-motion film sequence. Karen revealed the first set of evidence. Clips of Jimmy's jokes on social issues, contrasted with images and videos showing contradictions in his public statements. Greg narrated each example with surgical precision, his calm voice amplifying every blow. The audience's murmur grew into a tense chorus, some whispering in disbelief, others cheering the exposure. Jimmy's composure faltered. The cracks were visible in the sweat forming at his temples, the subtle tightening of his jaw, the stammer in his attempted defenses. Social media's reaction was instantaneous and brutal. Memes juxtaposed Jimmy's forced smirk with Karen's icy stare. Tweets circulated endlessly. "Jimmy Kimmel's comedy is canceled live." "HOA Karen just ended late night forever." Greg Gutfeld narrates Jimmy's downfall like a cinematic villain. Even comedians who usually stayed neutral weighed in, dissecting the confrontation frame by frame. Every pause, every word, every reaction became material for public judgment. Then came the turning point. Karen produced a folder meticulously organized. Every contradiction, every ironic statement, every performative act of charity juxtaposed with private behavior documented. "You've sold yourself as a voice of morality, Jimmy," Karen said, voice calm, unyielding. "But tonight, your brand is bankrupt." Greg stepped forward, summarizing the crescendo. "Comedy is built on truth. Without truth, it's hollow. And your comedy? It's been hollow for years." Jimmy tried to interject, to pivot back to humor, but Karen and Greg anticipated every move. It was a choreographed dismantling disguised as spontaneity, a cinematic trap from which there was no escape. The studio audience watched rapt as Jimmy's defenses collapsed in real time. His laughter rang hollow, defensive, desperate. Every camera angle captured the unraveling, every close-up showing the subtle tremor in his eyes. By the climax, the confrontation was more than public humiliation. It was a spectacle of truth versus illusion. Karen and Greg controlled every narrative beat, leaving Jimmy exposed in a way the audience could feel in their own bones. The energy was cinematic, like watching a hero's facade crumble in a slow-motion disaster sequence. The once confident host was reduced to floundering attempts, his iconic smirk replaced by stark vulnerability. After the show, the fallout continued. Ratings for Jimmy's program dipped sharply. Clips circulated endlessly, each view reinforcing the humiliation. Karen and Greg became icons of accountability, celebrated in forums, news shows, and online communities. Their intervention wasn't just a victory, it was a cultural phenomenon, reshaping conversations about comedy, morality, and public persona. Months later, late-night hosts quietly reconsidered their approach, aware that the boundaries of accountability had shifted permanently. Audiences demanded authenticity. Social media retained its power to expose, dissect, and critique. Jimmy's reputation, once untouchable, became a cautionary tale. Karen and Greg's confrontation was immortalized as a cinematic, unforgettable lesson in truth, power, and the fragility of curated person as got him through it all. One truth remained. In a world built on illusion, honesty can be merciless, public, and unforgettable. Comedy without accountability isn't comedy, it's performance. And those who perform without truth may eventually face a stage like Jimmy Kimmel did, watched by millions, judged by millions more, and exposed like never before. Backstage, before the confrontation even began, Jimmy Kimmel felt a knot tighten in his stomach. Usually he thrived on control timing, cameras, jokes rehearsed to perfection. But tonight, the air was different. The whispers of the crew, the focused eyes of Karen and Greg, the faint hum of anticipation in the studio all conspired to unbalance him. He tried to mask it with a practiced smile, a casual wave to the audience, but even he could feel the illusion slipping. Karen Tucker Carlson moved with deliberate precision. Every gesture, every tilt of her head, communicated authority. She didn't need to raise her voice. The room shifted with her presence. Greg Gutfeld, in contrast, carried a calm menace. His smirk never left his face, but every word promised meticulous exposure. The energy was almost cinematic, like the quiet before a storm. Tension thick enough to touch dot as the cameras rolled. Jimmy attempted a preemptive joke. "Looks like the HOA finally upgraded to primetime stars," he said, forcing a grin. But Karen's piercing gaze stopped him mid-laugh. Silence. The audience shifted uncomfortably, sensing the dynamic had shifted. This wasn't comedy as usual. This was something sharper, colder, and more precise. Karen spoke first, her voice cutting through the studio like a scalpel. "Jimmy, your comedy has lived in a bubble of convenience. Tonight, that bubble bursts." Greg stepped forward, calm, measured. "We're not here for applause. We're here for truth. And the truth isn't funny when it's been hidden for years." The audience leaned forward. Some took out their phones, recording every second. Social media lit up instantly, clips uploaded within seconds. Hashtags trending. Hashtag Kimmel exposed. Hashtag HOA domination. Hashtag comedy unmasked. Memes formed faster than anyone could follow. One picture juxtaposed Jimmy's forced smirk against Karen's icy glare with the caption, "When truth shows up to late-night comedy." Then came the montage, a carefully curated sequence of Jimmy's jokes, public statements, and social media posts contrasted with private behaviors and contradictions. It was a cinematic assault. The studio was silent, every eye fixed on the screen. Every audience member caught in the uncomfortable collision of humor and truth. Jimmy's jaw tightened. Sweat dotted his forehead. His attempts to respond felt rehearsed, inadequate. Every word was dissected, every pause amplified. Karen and Greg worked in tandem, a calculated symphony of confrontation. Karen would present a contradiction. Greg would narrate its significance with calm, devastating precision. The effect was slow, methodical, relentless. Jimmy fumbled, searching for deflection, for the charm that usually shielded him, but there was no shield tonight. The audience felt it, leaned in, gasped, murmured. Some applauded Karen's precision. Others whispered in disbelief. Online, the reactions were instantaneous and merciless. Tweets mocked Jimmy's failed attempts at humor. Videos of Karen leaning in with sharp words were GI-fed, shared endlessly. Forums dissected every line, every expression, comparing it to years of Jimmy's public persona. The narrative was clear. A carefully curated comedy brand had been stripped bare, exposed to millions. Even comedians and critics, who usually stayed neutral, analyzed his every word. The tension reached a new height when Karen revealed the folder, a meticulously organized record of Jimmy's public and private contradictions. Her voice was steady, calm, lethal. "You've sold yourself as a moral voice, Jimmy. But tonight, that brand is bankrupt." Greg followed. "Comedy without truth is hollow." "And yours?" "Hollow for years." Jimmy's defenses collapsed entirely. The practiced smirk disappeared. His voice faltered. Every attempt at humor rang hollow, desperate, awkward. Cameras caught the smallest tremors, the subtle shifts in posture, the flicker of panic in his eyes. It was cinematic, the audience both horrified and captivated. The world watched in slow motion, as if reality, itself had paused to witness his unraveling. By the climax, the confrontation had become a spectacle of truth versus illusion. Karen and Greg controlled every narrative beat, every movement, every word. Jimmy Kimmel, once untouchable, had been publicly dethroned. The studio erupted in a mixture of shock, awe, and exhilaration. Even those who had been neutral now felt the gravity of the exposure. The cameras panned across the audience, capturing every reaction, the stunned, the exhilarated, the conflicted. After the broadcast, the fallout was unstoppable. Ratings dropped. Clips circulated endlessly online. Memes multiplied. Karen and Greg became legends of accountability, celebrated across forums, TV panels, and social media communities. Their actions weren't just a victory, they were a cultural phenomenon, a cinematic moment that reshaped conversations about comedy, morality, and the responsibilities of public figures. Months later, the reverberations continued. Late-night hosts adjusted their humor, cautious, aware that audiences now demanded truth. Social media became a courtroom, holding celebrities accountable like never before. Jimmy's carefully curated persona had collapsed, a cautionary tale of what happens when illusions face relentless scrutiny. Karen and Greg's confrontation became immortalized, a lesson in precision, courage, and the power of truth over pretense. In the quiet aftermath, one realization lingered: comedy is fragile when divorced from integrity. Illusions, no matter how polished, cannot withstand scrutiny. And those who build careers on performative charm, laughter at others, or hollow empathy may eventually face a stage like Jimmy Kimmel did, illuminated, exposed, and unforgettable in their vulnerability. The world had watched, remembered, and learned. The curtain had fallen, and the truth remained, relentless, eternal. Jimmy Kimmel's heart was hammering. Every step toward the center of the stage felt like walking across a tightrope stretched over a pit of fire. His mind raced, replaying every preparation, every rehearsal. None of it mattered now. Karen Tucker Carlson and Greg Gutfeld weren't just visitors to the stage. They were predators circling their prey, calm, deliberate, and terrifyingly precise. The audience sensed the shift immediately. Murmurs spread like wildfire. Some reached for their phones, instinctively capturing every moment. The lights glinted off the polished set, but even the familiar glow of the studio couldn't warm the cold tension in the air. Jimmy's smile faltered mid-wave, replaced by a twitching corner of his mouth that betrayed a subtle panic. Karen started with a quiet intensity. "Jimmy, tonight isn't about jokes. It's about accountability. And your act? It's been a performance for far too long." She paused, letting the words sink like weighted stones. The audience leaned forward as if drawn by gravity, every eye fixed on her. Greg added, his voice calm but lethal, "We've dissected every joke, every skit, every statement you've made. And now we bring the truth to you and to everyone watching." Jimmy tried to pivot. "Well, you know, even the HOA has a sense of humor, right?" His voice trembled slightly. A weak laugh escaped him. But Karen didn't flinch. Her gaze froze him mid-step, mid-word, mid-thought. The audience's collective breath seemed to hold, waiting for the inevitable. The tension ratcheted higher as Karen produced a folder, carefully organized. Every page a record of contradictions, hypocrisies, and public statements undermined by private behavior. "You've sold morality as a brand, Jimmy," she said, her voice low, measured, precise. "But your brand is bankrupt, hollow, empty. Tonight we expose it." Greg narrated as if directing a cinematic documentary. Comedy isn't just clever lines. It's truth, insight, reflection. And yours has been performative, convenient, and destructive. The applause you've harvested? It's built on illusions. The audience reacted in waves, gasps, whispers, tension that vibrated in the air like electricity. Some tried to cheer Jimmy on, but even their applause sounded forced. Social media exploded as clips of Karen leaning in, and Jimmy's faltering smile spread across the internet in real time. Hashtags trended immediately. Hashtag Kimmel exposed. Hashtag comedy unmasked. Hashtag HOA domination. Memes multiplied, juxtaposing Jimmy's fake grin with Karen's lethal stare, turning the humiliation into global spectacle. Jimmy tried to respond, but the words faltered. Well, every attempt at humor rang hollow, desperate, awkward. Karen and Greg anticipated every move, responding before he could finish, dismantling every weak defense with calm precision. The cameras captured each subtle twitch, each tremor in his posture, every micro-expression of panic. Then came the cinematic montage. Clips of Jimmy's jokes on social issues played alongside images of private contradictions. Social media posts, speeches, luxury vacations, charitable stunts, all juxtaposed with evidence of hypocrisy, flashed across the screen. The audience gasped, some leaning forward, some covering their faces. Jimmy's jaw tightened, his voice caught in his throat. Even the crew paused, entranced by the unfolding drama. Karen's words struck like slow-motion hammer blows. You've created a persona that the world applauds, Jimmy, but it's hollow. Every laugh you've harvested has been at the expense of truth. Greg followed seamlessly. Comedy without truth is noise. And yours? Pure noise. The tension escalated to unbearable levels. Jimmy's defenses collapsed. His practiced smirk vanished. Sweat glistened on his forehead. His voice wavered. But there was no escape. Every attempt to reclaim control was met with surgical precision. Karen's calm stare, Greg's measured commentary, and the audience's rapt attention combined to form a cage around him. The climax unfolded in slow, cinematic waves. Jimmy's attempts at humor and charm failed spectacularly. Karen and Greg dictated every beat, their synergy impeccable. The audience watched, captivated, horrified, exhilarated. Every camera angle captured the unraveling, the faltering host, the unflinching challengers, the stunned viewers. Jimmy's persona had crumbled completely, replaced by stark, unguarded vulnerability. Outside the studio, the world reacted instantly. Clips went viral across TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. Comment sections exploded. Memes and GIFs multiplied. Even late-night hosts and comedians dissected the moment, replaying it endlessly. Jimmy had become a case study in public exposure, a cautionary tale of what happens when curated personas meet relentless truth. Weeks later, the fallout was undeniable. Ratings for Jimmy's show plummeted. Social media continued to amplify the humiliation. Karen and Greg's precision earned them cultural icon status. Late-night hosts adjusted their approaches. Audiences demanded authenticity, and the conversation about morality and comedy was forever shifted. In quiet reflection, one lesson stood out. Comedy is fragile when divorced from integrity. Illusions, no matter how polished, cannot withstand scrutiny. And those who build careers on charm, performance, and hollow empathy may eventually face a stage like Jimmy Kimmel did, illuminated, exposed, and unforgettable in their vulnerability. The studio lights glared down, harsh and unflinching, turning the polished stage into a battlefield. Jimmy Kimmel's fingers drummed nervously against the podium edge. Usually he controlled every beat of the room, every laugh, every sigh, but tonight, control had slipped through his grasp like sand. Karen Tucker Carlson and Greg Gutfeld didn't just occupy the stage, they owned it. Every subtle movement they made sent a ripple of tension through the audience. Jimmy's mind raced. I've handled tough guests before. I've diffused every awkward moment. This is just another segment, right? But instinct screamed that this was different. Karen's gaze was predatory, yet precise, dissecting him silently. Greg's smirk was patient, deliberate, as if savoring the anticipation. Jimmy tried to summon his usual charm, forcing a grin, waving awkwardly at the audience. But something had shifted. The energy had changed, sharp, electric, like static before a lightning strike. Karen's voice cut through the ambient murmur. "Jimmy, we didn't come here for laughs. We came here for truth." The calm authority in her tone made the studio seem smaller, claustrophobic. Greg followed, slow and deliberate. "And the truth isn't convenient. Jimmy, it doesn't care for timing. It doesn't bend for applause. Tonight, it speaks for itself." The audience leaned forward. Murmurs rolled through them like an approaching wave. Phones appeared in hands, instinctively recording. Social media had already started to light up. Clips of Karen's piercing stare and Greg's calm, lethal narrative appeared online within minutes. Hashtags began trending. Hashtag Kimmel exposed. Hashtag HOA domination. Hashtag comedy unmasked. Memes formed in real time. Jimmy's awkward grin contrasted against Karen's lethal stare. Captions mocking the unraveling of a carefully curated persona. Jimmy tried to pivot. "Well, I guess even the HOA has a sense of humor, huh?" His voice trembled slightly, the words hollow. Karen didn't flinch. Her gaze froze him mid-word. Greg leaned slightly forward, his calm tone cutting like a knife. "Your comedy isn't humor. It's convenience. You've masked avoidance with punchlines, and now it's time for those masks to fall." Jimmy's internal panic grew. Why aren't they laughing? Why isn't anyone laughing? He could feel the cameras, the audience, the world beyond, all waiting, all watching. His jokes, the ones that normally landed effortlessly, felt feeble, brittle, meaningless. He opened his mouth again, but the words dissolved into a weak, nervous chuckle. Karen reached into her folder, pulling out organized evidence like a prosecutor revealing a meticulously prepared case. Each page was a statement, a clip, a contradiction, a public facade crumbling under scrutiny. "You've sold morality as a brand, Jimmy," she said, calm, deliberate, precise. "But tonight, your brand is bankrupt, hollow, empty, and the world will see it." Greg narrated each contradiction with surgical precision, his calm voice amplifying the impact. "Your comedy hasn't been clever, insightful, or brave. It's been performative, convenient, and destructive. The laughter you've harvested? It's built on illusions, on pretense, on carefully curated hypocrisy." The audience reacted in waves. Gasps, whispered exclamations, some leaning forward as if drawn by invisible tension, some raising their hands to cover mouths. Jimmy's sweat glistened under the harsh lights. Every twitch, every subtle flinch was captured in slow motion by cameras, broadcasting vulnerability lived to a stunned audience. Meanwhile, online, the world erupted. Twitter exploded with instantaneous commentary. "Jimmy Kimmel can't even pretend anymore. Oh, Karen just ended late night as we know it." Greg Gutfeld narrates Jimmy's downfall like a cinematic villain. Memes multiplied. GIFs animated his faltering grin, each one layering humiliation onto humiliation. Reddit forums dissected every micro-expression. Late-night comedians paused their monologues to analyze the clips. The spectacle was global, relentless. Jimmy tried one last pivot, a defensive joke. "Well, I thought." But Karen anticipated him, cutting through the tension like a blade. "No more deflections, Jimmy. No more charm. This isn't about laughs anymore. This is about truth. And the truth doesn't care for your timing or your persona." Greg leaned forward slightly, voice calm, deadly, deliberate. "Comedy without truth is hollow. And yours has been hollow for years." Every word, every joke, every laugh you've harvested has been carefully constructed to avoid accountability. Tonight, the illusion ends. Jimmy's defenses completely crumbled. His practiced grin disappeared, replaced by visible panic. Sweat traced his temples. His words faltered, his charm evaporated. Every camera angle captured the unraveling, each subtle twitch, each shallow breath, each fleeting glance at the folder Karen held like a weapon. The audience could almost feel the gravity of every moment pressing down on him. Karen and Greg worked like a synchronized machine, a choreography of exposure. Karen presented contradiction after contradiction. Greg narrated significance after significance. Each blow was calculated. Each pause, each inflection, each camera angle amplified humiliation. The montage of Jimmy's public and private contradictions, the jokes, the social media posts, the charitable stunts juxtaposed against private hypocrisy played like a cinematic expose. And the studio audience felt it in their bones. Jimmy tried again. I mean, well. But words failed him. Karen's stare, Greg's narrative, and the audience's collective attention formed a cage of accountability. There was no escape. Every attempt at humor rang hollow, desperate, awkward. The cameras captured every detail, the trembling of his fingers, the tightening of his jaw, the subtle collapse of posture. By the climax, it was a full-scale unraveling. Karen and Greg dictated every beat. Jimmy Kimmel, once untouchable, was exposed in front of millions. The audience erupted into gasps, applause, and stunned silence simultaneously. Cameras captured stunned faces, whispered comments, shocked gasps, the theater of humiliation perfectly choreographed in real time. Outside, social media amplified the spectacle. Clips went viral on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter. Comment sections overflowed. Memes multiplied. Late-night hosts paused, critics analyzed, audiences relived the humiliation over and over. Jimmy had become a case study, a cinematic cautionary tale of curated persona versus unrelenting truth. Weeks later, the ripple effects continued. Ratings plummeted. Social media carried the humiliation forward. Karen and Greg's precision earned them a cultural legend status. Late-night hosts reconsidered their humor. Audiences demanded authenticity. Jimmy Kimmel's fall became immortalized as a lesson in vulnerability, accountability, and the power of truth. Even months later, one truth remained: comedy is fragile when divorced from integrity. Illusions, no matter how polished, cannot withstand scrutiny. Those who build careers on charm, performance, and hollow empathy may eventually face a stage like Jimmy Kimmel did: illuminated, exposed, unforgettable. And the world watched, learned, and remembered. Jimmy Kimmel's thoughts raced uncontrollably. How did it come to this? I've been the master of timing, of charm, of control. And now, they're dismantling me, piece by piece. Every joke I've told, every laugh I've collected, every persona I've carefully curated, it's all slipping through my fingers. They're not laughing. No one is laughing. Not the audience, not me. And the cameras never blink. He tried to summon humor, the reflex that had saved him countless times. Well, maybe we can see the HOA as kind of funny. His voice faltered. The words felt hollow even as they left his mouth. Karen's glare locked onto him, sharp and unyielding, freezing him mid-thought. Greg leaned forward slightly, calm, deliberate, like a predator savoring the final moments. The audience reacted instantly. Gasps, nervous chuckles, murmurs that spread like wildfire. Some leaned forward, gripping their seats, phones raised to capture every second. Others whispered, shocked at the audacity, the sheer intensity of the confrontation. "I've never seen Jimmy like this," one audience member muttered. "He's vulnerable," another whispered. "Karen's not just talking, she's exposing him, Corinne's voice sliced through the studio air, low and precise. "Jimmy, your comedy has thrived on convenience, on avoidance, on illusion. Tonight, the illusion ends," Greg added, deliberate and slow. "We've cataloged every joke, every skit, every public statement. What you've built is a facade, and tonight, that facade is exposed for everyone to see." Jimmy's mind spiraled. No. I can't. This isn't happening. I've handled worse. I'm supposed to be in control. I'm supposed to land the laughs. I'm supposed to. His chest tightened. Sweat formed at his temples. His fingers trembled as he gripped the podium. Every attempt to reclaim control dissolved before it could even take shape. Corinne opened the folder she had brought. Methodical, deliberate. Each page, each image, each video still was a dagger, slicing through years of carefully curated persona. "You've sold yourself as a moral authority, Jimmy," she said, her voice calm, cutting. "But the world sees the truth. Hollow, empty, constructed. Tonight, your brand is bankrupt." Greg narrated the contradictions, each word precise, measured, almost theatrical. Comedy without truth is noise. And yours has been noise for years. You've harvested applause built on illusions, pretense, and avoidance of accountability. The laughter you've collected? It's been cheap, hollow, and tonight it evaporates. The audience reacted in waves. Some leaned forward, eyes wide. Some whispered, shaking their heads. Some clutched phones, recording every moment. Even the crew behind the cameras paused, transfixed. Jimmy's usual quick wit was gone. Every attempted joke fell flat. Every defensive quip sounded desperate, hollow. He stumbled, words failing him. Charm evaporated. Social media erupted in real time. Twitter exploded. "Jimmy Kimmel can't even pretend anymore." HOA Corinne just ended late-night comedy as we know it. Greg Gutfeld narrates Jimmy's downfall like a cinematic villain. TikTok clips racked up millions of views. Memes juxtaposed Jimmy's failing smirk with Corinne's deadly stare. Reddit threads analyzed every frame, every expression, every line of dialogue. Even casual viewers who had never watched his show before were captivated, dissecting every second. The montage began clips of Jimmy's jokes, his social media posts, public statements, all contrasted with evidence of private contradictions. Charitable stunts juxtaposed with private indifference. Public outrage juxtaposed with performative laughter. It was cinematic, surgical, devastating. The studio audience gasped, leaned forward, whispered, some covering faces in disbelief. Jimmy's jaw tightened. His voice faltered. Sweat traced his temples. Even his blinking seemed hesitant, unnatural. Corinne leaned in, almost imperceptibly, her words like a scalpel. "Every joke you've told, every laugh you've harvested, has been carefully curated to hide reality. You've performed morality, empathy, authenticity, but it's all hollow. And tonight, the hollow cracks open for everyone to see." Greg's calm tone narrated the climax. Deliberate, precise. Comedy isn't about convenience. It's about truth, insight, reflection. What you've built is noise. Tonight, the noise ends. Jimmy's defenses crumbled entirely. His body language betrayed him, slumping shoulders, trembling hands, eyes darting, words dissolving into stammers. Every camera angle captured it all. The panic, the vulnerability, the collapse of a carefully constructed persona. The audience was transfixed, watching in real time as one of late night's unassailable figures unraveled before them. Outside, the world erupted. Social media amplified the spectacle endlessly. Clips went viral, hashtags trended globally. Memes multiplied, dissecting every second. Late-night hosts, comedians, and critics dissected the confrontation endlessly. Jimmy had become a case study, a cinematic cautionary tale of persona versus unrelenting truth. Weeks passed and the fallout continued. Ratings plummeted. Appearances became awkward and rare. Karen and Greg were celebrated as icons of accountability. Late-night hosts reconsidered every joke. Bag your little bubble. The words hit like cinematic slow-motion punches. Every syllable was measured, designed to dismantle decades of late-night performative confidence. Greg added his signature biting twist, his voice dripping both sarcasm and authority. You've laughed at others, made mockeries of real struggles, and yet you call that comedy. Tonight we're holding a mirror up, Jimmy, and that mirror doesn't lie, the audience gasped. Social media was already alive in the background clips circulating, hashtags trending. Tweets imagined in real time, hashtag Kimmel exposed, hashtag HOA victory. Jimmy Kimmel's comedy is canceled live. People replayed Karen's words, dissected Greg's sarcasm. Memes exploded. The humiliation was instant, viral, and merciless. Behind the scenes, the expose began to unfold. Karen had spent months gathering every misstep, every failed joke, every contradiction in Jimmy's public persona. She revealed the hypocrisy layer by layer, his criticisms of the wealthy while living in luxury, his edgy jokes that relied on punching down, his carefully curated persona of empathy that crumbled under scrutiny. Each revelation landed like a hammer, echoing through the studio like a gavel in a courtroom. Then the turning point, the moment that sealed Jimmy's downfall. He tried to deflect, tried to pivot into his own scripted charm. But Karen anticipated it. Greg timed the intervention perfectly. No more deflections, Karen said. Tonight, the truth isn't optional. The lights seemed to sharpen. The sound of the audience's collective intake of breath, almost audible. Jimmy's confidence cracked out in the climax. It all unraveled. Jimmy's attempts to reclaim the stage fell flat. His laughter sounded hollow. Every camera cut captured the subtle shift. The once commanding late-night host reduced to defensive murmurs. Karen and Greg controlled the narrative completely, their composure a stark contrast to Jimmy's unraveling act. By the end, the humiliation wasn't just public, it was poetic. The faux comedy persona was stripped bare, leaving only a man who had miscalculated the consequences of underestimating his opponents. In the aftermath, the studio felt different. The audience left buzzing, clips circulating endlessly online. HOA forums praised Karen's precision. Twitter celebrated Greg's timing. And Jimmy? The fall was dramatic, permanent in the eyes of the digital world. The incident sparked debates about authenticity, satire, and the fine line between comedy and performative righteousness. Months later, reflections surfaced. People didn't just remember the jokes or the confrontation. They remembered the truth laid bare on live television. HOA, Karen Tucker Carlson and Greg Gutfeld, didn't just humiliate a late-night host. They exposed a system, a performance, a narrative that had gone unchallenged for too long. And in that cinematic moment of live confrontation, the world saw a dramatic, unforgettable lesson. Fake comedy, no matter how polished, can't withstand relentless truth. The studio lights flickered as Jimmy slumped slightly, trying to regain composure. Every eye in the audience was fixed on him, some with disbelief, others with barely contained glee. Karen and Greg didn't flinch. They stood as statues of unshakable calm, their presence dominating the space like titans in a coliseum. Jimmy's usual quick wit, his armor of practiced humor, was gone, leaving only a man exposed to the brutal clarity of truth. The tension didn't just hang in the studio, it spilled into the digital world. Social media erupted in real time, turning the confrontation into an instant spectacle. Clips of Karen's icy glare and Greg's scathing remarks went viral within minutes. Jimmy Kimmel can't even fake it anymore, read one trending tweet. HOA Karen just ended late-night comedy as we know it, wrote another. Memes exploded, pitting Jimmy's faltering smirk against Karen's unwavering stare, turning his humiliation into entertainment for millions. Back on stage, The audience shifted nervously, unsure whether to laugh or gasp. Some tried to cheer him on, but even their applause felt hollow against the tide of exposure crashing down. Karen leaned closer, her voice cutting through the tension like a scalpel. "You've built a career on the illusion of honesty, Jimmy. Tonight, that illusion ends. Every joke, every laugh you've harvested, it's all hollow without accountability." Greg stepped in, pacing slowly across the stage, his words measured but lethal. "Comedy isn't about clever lines. It's about truth. And the truth? You've avoided it. You've mocked real struggles for applause. You've disguised hypocrisy as satire. That ends now." The room went still. Even the production crew stopped mid-task, mesmerized by the raw intensity of the confrontation. Then came the deeper expose, the layer beneath the public humiliation. Karen produced a folder, pulling out carefully documented examples of Jimmy's contradictions and missteps over the years. Photos, video clips, transcripts, it was a slow surgical dissection of his public persona. "You lecture the world about morality," Karen said, flipping through a page with surgical precision, "but you've ignored every rule you expect others to follow. Tonight, the mirror isn't optional, Jimmy. Look at yourself." Jimmy fumbled, trying to interject, fumbling through his defense. But the crowd sensed the unraveling. His jokes, once sharp, now sounded defensive, desperate. He stumbled over words that would normally roll off his tongue with ease. Every attempt to pivot back into comedy fell flat, the studio echoing with the uncomfortable silence of a performance gone terribly wrong. The turning point came when Karen dropped the final piece of evidence, a meticulously compiled record of his public statements, contradicting the causes he claimed to support. "You've sold sincerity as a brand," she said, voice low but lethal. "And now the brand is bankrupt." Greg nodded, his gaze never leaving Jimmy. "This isn't just entertainment, Jimmy. This is accountability. And in this room, you're out of excuses." For the first time, Jimmy looked truly lost. The stage lights captured the faint tremor in his smile, the subtle shift in posture from confident host to exposed human. Karen and Greg had flipped the script entirely. What was supposed to be a controlled, late-night segment had become a live unmasking. The audience murmured, some rising to their feet, caught between shock and awe. The climax hit like a cinematic explosion. Jimmy's attempts to regain control were met with calm, relentless opposition. Karen and Greg's synergy left no opening for deflection. His laughter, once practiced and polished, rang hollow and desperate. By the end, he was silent, the studio holding its breath as the full weight of the humiliation sank in. The cameras captured it all, the faltering host, the unwavering challengers, and the stunned audience. And the aftermath was immediate. Clips flooded the internet, trending worldwide. HOA forums debated Karen's precision and Greg's timing. Late-night commentary shows dissected every word, every expression. The incident sparked conversations about authenticity in entertainment, the moral responsibility of public figures, and the fragility of carefully curated personas. Weeks later, the ripple effect continued. Jimmy's ratings dipped, while Karen and Greg became unlikely heroes in the court of public opinion. The narrative had shifted completely. It wasn't just about one humiliating segment, it was about exposing the theater of pretense, the cost of building a career on false narratives. And in the minds of the public, the message was clear. Comedy without truth is nothing more than smoke and mirrors. And even the brightest stars can be burned when the illusion collapses. Days after the episode aired, the